would like to thank you to today's ECE Department Distinguished Speaker Colloquium. Today we have a speaker, Marshall Crane, who has a remarkable background. This seminar series is sponsored by Floor, and we have Jeremy Ward from Floor who's going to give an overview of what Floor does, and we thank them very much for their support for this colloquium series, and we look forward to hearing about Floor. Then we'll get into the meat and chocolate
Dr. Alexander. Thank you all for coming today. Just real quickly, without taking too much away from what you really came here to see. My name is Jeremy Ward with Floor Power at Charlotte, North Carolina. Floor is globally one of the largest EPCM, engineering, procurement, construction, maintenance, and project management firms in the world. We're glad to be here today sponsoring this speech that Marshall is about to give. If you don't know about Floor, I encourage you to stick around after everything's over. I'm seeing out the upfront, outside, the refreshments. Got a little bit of material, a little bit more about what Floor does and how Floor may impact your future. Please stop by and talk to me about that. And in your free time, if you would, check out Floor.com. Just kind of get familiar with who we are, what we do, and the areas of the world that we service. So, without any further ado, I'm going to let Marshall turn it over to you.
Now for the formal introduction. Okay. So today's speaker is Marshall Crane, who is very well known as the founder of How Stuff Works, and that's an award-winning website that offers clear, objective, and easy to understand explanations of how the world around us actually works. And he started this as a hobby and took it through several rounds of funding and was bought up by Discovery Communications in 2007. He has a remarkable background in terms of communicating with the media, explaining how things work. And on CNN Delight News, Modern Marvels, and the Winfrey Show. And he, in 2008, 2009, was the host of National Geographic Channel's Factory Floor with Marshall Crane. And he's also written more than a dozen books, and also many web publications, such as How to Make $1 Million. Are you handing out free copies of that? Even better. Okay, well then. Robotic Nation, Nana, and The Day You Discard Your Body, and The Teenager's Guide to the Real World, which is now in its 10th printing. So he has a remarkable number of accomplishments. He earned his Bachelor's of Science degree in Electrical Engineering from the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and he got an MS in Computer Science here at NC State University. And he was selected as a member of the NC State University Academy of Outstanding Teachers, and now he lives with his family in Cary, pretty much right next door. So please join me in welcoming Marshall Crane.
All right. My history with North Carolina State actually goes back farther than that. When I was a junior in high school, I think the National Science Foundation had a program here at NC State, and you could come as a junior in high school and live in one of the high-rise dorms for the summer, and you took a couple classes. So one of the classes, this was in 1979, so one of the classes was in the 8080 microprocessor. If you remember way back, that was, you could actually go to Radio Shack and buy one of those for like $450. This was a processor with 2,500 transistors on it, and that was a miracle. It was absolutely unbelievable. So, and then I took a programming class where we used punch cards to program with. That is sort of how much things have changed since I started my relationship with NC State. So what we're going to talk about today is the meaning of life and the role of robots. And this will be a little different from probably normal double E fare, but I think the robot part is especially relevant. And the reason I think that is sort of in the same way that if you think back to when the folks were coming up with the first nuclear bombs, you know, they were doing all this research and it was really cool and exciting and they could do really powerful things. And then it turned out that all of that got used for, you know, initially for making a bomb that blew up millions of people. And it really was probably kind of uncomfortable to them. And so there is something similar that could happen with robots, and I would just like to explore that. So the first part is the meaning of life. And to talk about that, we're going to go back to the very beginning and understand where we came from as human beings from a scientific standpoint, and then work forward from there through the meaning of life. So you've probably heard this before. I think we all know it from our science classes, but it's helpful to repeat it and use it as a starting point, which is that hydrogen, given sufficient time, turns into people. And if you think about that, it's absolutely, I mean, on one hand, it's incomprehensible that hydrogen atoms would turn into human beings, and yet, if you look at the universe, that's exactly what happened. So it's a fascinating story, and we're just going to spend a minute and look at how this actually occurred. So we think the best scientific evidence we have available right now is that the universe began 13.75 or so billion years ago. And at that point, what there was hydrogen. I think the ratio is something like 92% hydrogen, maybe 8% helium. It could be 94 and 6, but that's, you know, what the evidence seems to indicate. We had this massive amount of hydrogen. And hydrogen, being atomic and having mass, has the desire to attract. Anything with mass will attract to other things with mass. So you have the hydrogen atoms with this very simple principle that they will attract one another through gravitational forces. And there might also be something in there with dark matter, but we don't exactly understand how dark matter works yet, or why, or if it even exists. Actually, we're still figuring that out. So, but the hydrogen atoms started attracting. And if you get a big enough ball of hydrogen atoms in one place, they will cause enough gravitational pressure to create a fusion reaction. And you end up with a sun. It's the byproduct of that. And a sun will sit in space and act like a star. It will radiate out a huge amount of light and heat, and inside that fusion reactor, you will get fusion products. So hydrogen and hydrogen fuse together, you get helium. Helium atoms will fuse together, you get carbon. Carbon atoms will fuse together, you get iron. And so you get a fusion ladder of all the elements up through iron in the core of the star. Eventually, once there's so much iron in it that you know, the fusion process can't make use of iron in an energy positive way. So at that point, the star collapses, and if it's big enough, about 4 times the size of our sun, then it undergoes a supernova event where it explodes. And during that massive explosion, you get all the elements from iron up through uranium, maybe a little plutonium, but usually it's thought that the 92 natural elements are hydrogen to uranium, and they are all formed in the cores of suns. So this supernova event occurs. You have all the natural elements spewing out in this huge explosion, and those recoalesce into new solar systems. And we happen to occupy one of those solar systems. So those elements recoalesce into a new star, our sun, planets around them in orbits, made up of the fusion products of a preceding star. And this is where we find ourselves today. Stars tend to form together into galaxies. We aren't sure exactly why that happens yet either, but they do. And so the question is, how many galaxies are there? How big is our universe? So this is a pound of salt, about 0.45 kilograms of salt. Let's say that one of these, which even with this fancy projector I can't show you, one of these grains of salt is a galaxy. Okay? This pound of salt contains about 10 million galaxies. So here on this towel, there's 10 million particles of salt. How many galaxies are there in the universe? There are thought to be between 100 and 500 billion galaxies in the universe. This is 10 million. So to simulate the universe, I would need 20,000 pounds of salt, which would be 200 billion galaxies. That, is probably close to what the actual number of galaxies is. So 20,000 pounds of salt is a whole truckload, a dump truck full of salt. It would be a pile about 12 feet wide, say from here to here, in a big circle, and 6 feet tall. That would be, if you look at the slump angle of salt, it's about 42 degrees, I think, or something. So it wouldn't be a tall pile. It would be a low, flat pile, about as tall as me, nice and wide. That's how many galaxies there are in our universe. Each one of those galaxies then contains a massive amount of stuff. So we take, our galaxy, our grain of salt, and we blow it up and we look at it. It's the Milky Way Galaxy. If we could get up above the galaxy and look down on it, this is what we think it would look like. It's 100 million or 100,000 light years across is the scale of this object. And it has, we think, something like 200 to 400 billion stars in it. And one of those stars is our sun. So it's hard for us to imagine the universe of 200 billion galaxies. It's hard for us to imagine a galaxy of 200 billion stars, but we can start to imagine our sun. So in the back here, we have a model of our sun. This is a soccer ball. It's a normal 22 centimeter diameter soccer ball. If that's our sun, then that screen has gone dead. So we won't use this. Here's a peppercorn. This is approximately 2 millimeters. At this scale, our planet would be, this is about 62 feet, we think. It really would be 74 feet away. So this is a model of our solar system. There's the sun. Here's the Earth to scale, only it'd be back here somewhere, outside the room. And Neptune would be a garbanzo bean somewhere over at the farmer's market. That's the scale of our universe. Thank you very much. That's the scale of our solar system. On this peppercorn is us. This is, you think about it, millions of species of life, all the oceans, all the continents, 6.8 billion people. We're all on this tiny little peppercorn. That is our reality. So where did life come from? Current scientific thought is that life arose through a process of abiogenesis. There are lots of theories about how that's happening or how that happened. We just made our first synthetic life form this year that sort of probes into how it might have happened. So life arose through abiogenesis. Life then evolved and formed all the species that we see today, along with a whole bunch of species that didn't, that died along the way. And here we are. We are the product of that abiogenesis and that evolutionary process. That is how hydrogen turns into people, according to what scientists think today. There's a huge amount of evidence that goes into formulating that simplified view. Obviously, we could spend weeks and weeks talking about all the details of that. So, since we're here to talk about the meaning of life, let's actually look at some life. And what I have here is pond life. There's this lake out here at Centennial Campus, and this is lake water. It's got all kinds of stuff in it: bacteria, protozoa, algae, all of it invisible to us. It was invisible to us until a human being and his friends and her friends came up with the microscope so we could see it. But if we were to take a drop of this and put it under here, it'd be like looking at an aquarium. It's an amazing amount of life in just a little tiny drop of pond water. And that life, like if you look at a paramecium, if you go actually get a molecular biology book and read what the deal is with paramecium, it just utterly blows your mind. There's little chemical machines inside there that are picking off enzyme patterns from DNA strands and untwisting DNA strands and twisting them back together and repairing coding errors that occur in DNA strands. And there's little chemical motors that can spin propellers, or in the case of paramecium, like row these little oars of hairs they have. It's just mind-boggling what happens inside even these simplest, tiniest, invisible cells that are in lake water. So these paramecium, they're born, they live, they die. That's by the gazillions. It's the nature of life in a pond, all invisibly. So the other thing about that, though, is that we would think of these as germs. And here's a product that kills 99.9% of common household germs. Well, these are common household germs. So say you were to take an eyedropper and you were to get some chlorine and you just put a couple drops in here, all that life has just been extinguished. So that's life. I mean, it is that easy to extinguish life, even though it's also that easy to find it on this planet. This life is now no longer with us. Okay, so it's amazing, but if you think about it, it also has a certain amount of meaninglessness to it. There's, that life is all gone now. So we can ask another question. Is there an afterlife for those paramecium? Did they all just travel off to an afterlife? And I think we would say, from a scientific standpoint, no, there's not. Because what these are little chemical machines. And when they died, those chemical machines ceased to function. There is not, a heaven, if you want to think of it. There is no afterlife for paramecium. And there's no mechanism for there to be such a thing because they are chemical machines. I know there's a box up in the back corner here with a little robot in it. That's an electronic machine. It uses magnets and electric currents and so on to make motion and to think and to do what that little robot can do. These are using a different foundation, but they are machines, just like that's a machine. They are chemical machines. So let's look at something a little more interesting. These are crickets, purchased at the pet store last night. They're usually used to feed the lizards or frogs or something. And they're completely functional crickets. And they're amazing. I mean, absolutely amazing. I had the actual joy of sitting down this morning with one of the professors here who is now embedding electrodes into insects so that we can control them by remote control. And, he's slicing into the pupa stage and embedding his electrodes so that muscle grows around the electrodes and then attaching this amazing tiny little microprocessor with a radio receiver to it so he can control the bug with his remote control box. So they have muscles, they have antenna, they have eyes, they have smell receptors. They're utterly, utterly amazing. And they are alive. So if I take a cotton ball and some fingernail polish remover, and I, put it on here and drop it in, it'll take a couple minutes, But the chemical vapor from that fingernail polish remover is going to poison the chemical machine that powers the crickets, and in a minute or two, they'll be dead. That's life. So does a cricket's life have meaning? And importantly, is there an afterlife for crickets? No, there's not. I think scientifically, instinctively, we know that. They are chemical machines. They're a lot more interesting than these chemical machines, and they're visible to us, and they actually have a little bit of a personality. If you think about it, you're a little sad thinking that these crickets are going to die. And that's because crickets have good PR. If this was a jar of roaches or ticks or bed bugs, you might think completely differently. But because they're crickets, they're kind of cute. You know, Jiminy Cricket, crickets chirping at night, you know, all the things that go with cricket PR make us a little bit sad that these crickets are in the process of dying. So, nonetheless, there's no afterlife. Jiminy Cricket doesn't exist, and also, if he died, he wouldn't have an afterlife because he's a chemical machine. That's what crickets are. So, and I see a look of horror on a couple faces. So let me just state that this is empty and this is water. So I haven't actually killed anything today. I don't want PETA coming down upon me or anything like that. But you felt something, didn't you? I mean, it is a little sad to think that a human being can just take the life of something like that arbitrarily and snuff it out completely. But we do it all the time. And a good case study in that is chickens. Okay? Like, I could bring a chicken up here with a hatchet and I could cut its head off, but I don't need to because we have factories that do that. So chickens are raised in cages. They're killed, packaged, and eaten. We do this at a rate of 1 million chickens per hour in the United States. We kill more chickens in the US per year than there are humans on the entire planet. So we take the whole planet full of humans and we kill them every year, plus more. Like, you know, we do more than we need to. And that's just in the United States. That's how the chickens work. So they're far more amazing. Chickens, I've actually had a pet chicken, and that's a long story, but his name was Oliver, and he was very cool. If you've ever worked with crows, they're even cooler. But chickens are very cool. They're very complex. They have personalities. They have behaviors. They're amazing. And yet we kill something like 10 billion of them every year and eat them without even thinking about it. So does a chicken's life have meaning if that's its life? Never sees the sun, never sees grass. It just eats pellets out of a bucket for 8 weeks and then it's killed. Does it have meaning? And, you know, does it have an afterlife? No, it doesn't. We don't imagine there being a place filled with and sifting and, you know, all this stuff. 2 people, and at night they went home. And it would call them if something went wrong. I mean, that's how automated they had turned flower making. Like, 1 person full-time ran that entire gigantic, it was unbelievable that 2 guys, and they had this little control room, and it would just page them when something went wrong. They could have taken the whole day off if they wanted, because nothing ever went wrong. So that's the nature of the beast. The beast is, we are going to use automation to lower costs and eliminate human labor at every single turn available, because that is how our economy is wired right now. There's nothing that's going to stop that short of us thinking, hey, it would be nice if all human beings could go on perpetual vacation when the robots are doing all the work, and let's work toward that as a species. Yes? I've written about this quite a bit, and I don't know, I don't know that I would call it socialistic, but what would you call the Star Trek economy? Okay. Is Star Trek socialistic? I mean, and I realize that's science fiction and it's totally hypothetical, but in general, it's also preposterous, because if you have all that technology, they wouldn't have any human beings on the ship. I mean, you would have robots, obviously, because that's where we're headed. But it's the case that you would give each human being access to housing and food and water and so on in the same way that we have access to highways now. I mean, we access highways. I haven't ever really labeled that. Is our highway system socialistic? Well, then, so if food was done in that manner, you. Well, I think we have two choices. One choice is we take out all those jobs, we do what you said, we make human ability valueless. And in our society, as it's structured right now, what happens is wealth all concentrates into a handful of people. That's happening right now. And the folks who don't make it end up homeless or on welfare or living under a bridge in Key West or something. I mean, that is how our society is wired right now. So we can either let that process extend to a very uncomfortable limit. I don't think we have a revolution, whoever asked that, because we will eventually have robotic police forces that won't allow that kind of thing. I mean, we're going to get boxed in, I think. Or we come up with a system that says, every day you get a certain number of credits that you can use for your housing and your food and your clothing and so on, and you can use it in any way you like in this economy. I mean, those seem to be the options, because you aren't going to get a job because this second intelligent species is going to beat us in every manner. I mean, I guess you could hand paint greeting cards and say, yes, this was a human-made artifact. Would you like to buy it? It's hard to imagine an economy made out of that, and it's hard to imagine that a robot wouldn't just duplicate that and say, oh, look, I can do exactly the same brushstroke she does, and so here, take mine instead. I don't know the answer to that question, but I would pose this to you to just think about over the next couple of days. If you had, let's say the university, not the university, let's say a corporation gave you a stipend and said, here you go, $100,000 a year. This is your stipend. You can do anything you want, absolutely anything. We have no strings attached. You choose. What would you do? $40 years. Here's your stipend. Your lifetime. Your 30,000 days. Blow it open. So now you've got 30,000 days. You got $100,000 a year stipend. Everything else stays the same. You're an island, and you won the lottery. What would you choose to do? I mean, I've thought about this question a lot. But just think about it. Would you choose to scrub the toilets of the Hilton Hotel down the street? Probably not. I'm just guessing. Would you choose to flip burgers at McDonald's? Probably not. Would you be a trash man? No, I don't think so. There's a set of things that immediately no human being would ever do. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. Would you work in the shark tank of a giant corporation? I don't know. Would you? I know a lot of people who would just start educating themselves. They would say, I'm going to blow out my education. I got a lot of stuff I want to learn and play with and probe. And I know a lot of people, as funny as this sounds, who would just hop on a cruise ship and they would be sipping margaritas, to use a previous example, all day by the pool, and they would be completely happy doing that. I bet half of America actually might fall into that category. I don't know. I think if that was how your life worked, you would find something to do with that existence, and it would have meaning for you. I got a good friend who would bass fish all day. He'd get himself a boat, and he would put gas in it, and he would fish all day long, and he would be absolutely happy and contented. He'd come home, and he'd cook his bass, and he'd read with his kid, and that would be his day. A lot of us would live very simple but very different lives if that were the case. Just think about it. What would you do if you had that stipend? How many trillions and trillions of formerly live chickens? They're chemical machines. So what about humans? Us. We can ask this. Is there an afterlife for people, and does our life have meaning? And the fact is that we are built on the same chemical substrate as these crickets, and we evolved in the same way as these crickets, and there's no magic inside our chemical machine. We are chemical machines. As much as we kind of are repulsed by that, it is a fact. So, is there an afterlife for us? No. There isn't, because there's no mechanism, just like there's no mechanism for these other life forms. We're the same as them. So what is our meaning? Because we would say a chicken doesn't really have a meaning to its life, so what is our meaning? So here's the reality of our situation. We are a completely accidental species that is living on this tiny peppercorn in space, and we are inside of a gigantic truckload of galaxies. That is our reality. Do we have meaning inside that reality? Or are our lives meaningless? So here's the thing about human beings. We actually create meaning, and I can give you a very quick example of that. Here's a piece of paper. Normal 8.5 by 11 notebook paper is what it came from. If I crumple this up and I throw it on the floor, what's going to happen? Probably a janitor is going to come along, or one of us will come along, and we'll see a scrap of paper lying on the floor, and we'll pick it up and we'll put it in, in our pocket or in our trash can or whatever. Now let me show you another piece of paper. Okay, here's a piece of paper. Here's a piece of paper. The difference is this has ink and a certain pattern on it that is very interesting to us. Let's say I do this. How long is it going to sit there? Okay, it's not going to sit there necessarily very long, and I do want that back before the class ends. It's not going to sit there very long because that object has meaning. This object does not have meaning. Unless Picasso was to come and put some lines on it, then it would have meaning. Or, somebody else famous like President Obama were to sign it. He just recently, there was a note he signed and it sold for $7,000 a couple weeks ago. Okay? If the right person puts the right lines on this, suddenly it has meaning and it's valuable. But right now, it's not valuable. This, on the other hand, has meaning. And we've created an entire system around this so that now our lives are completely dependent on little scraps of paper with ink on them or little bits in computer memory that represent the scraps of paper. And if we don't have enough of these, we can die. There are people, 10 million children a year die from things like starvation, easily solvable problems like starvation or lack of clean water or something. They don't have enough of these little pieces of paper. This paper has real, actual meaning. So humans create meaning. And the money system is just one really good example of how completely arbitrary and weird our meaning systems can be. But we have created that out of thin air. We are, we're supposed to be Homo sapiens, the apes that know, or, wise apes or whatever. That's not really what we are. We are apes that create meaning out of thin air. And we can apply that to our lives. So there are actually 3 ways to give your life meaning. So here's the first way, generosity. I am going to quickly read you a story. And just out of curiosity, since I'm in a college environment, how many of you frequent Reddit.com? Oh, it's amazing. Not a single one. Okay, so there is a website called Reddit.com. This would be very disappointing to the people of Reddit. Very disappointing. But I frequent it a lot. I happen to like the website. So this is a little story that was uploaded by a user of Reddit whose handle, his username is Wartoad. And I'm going to just read you this story very quickly. I was day tripping to Vancouver from Seattle and stopped in for lunch at a little cafe. From my window, I saw a young teenage girl out in the cold, squatted down in a closed-up business's doorway, holding a small bundle in her arms. She was panhandling. People were mostly walking by, ignoring her. She looked just broken. I finished up my meal and went outside, went through my wallet, looking for one of those little scraps of paper, actually, went through my wallet and thought I'd give her $5 for some food. I got up to her, and she was sobbing. She looked like she was 14 or 15, and that bundle in her arms was a baby wrapped up. I felt like I just got punched in the chest. She looked up, putting on a game face, and asked for any change I had. I asked her if she'd like some lunch. Right next door was a small Quick Trip type grocery store. I got a can of formula for the baby, very young, maybe 2 to 3 months old, and took her back to the cafe, though I'd just eaten. She was very thankful, got a burger and just inhaled it, got her some pie and ice cream. She opened up and we talked. She was 15, got pregnant, parents were angry, and she was fighting with them, so she ran away. She'd been gone for almost 1 full year. I asked her if she'd like to go home, and she got silent. I coaxed her. She said her parents wouldn't want her back. I coaxed further, and she admitted she stole $5,000 in cash from her dad. It turns out that $5,000 doesn't last long at all, and the streets are tough on a 15-year-old, very tough. She did want to go back, but she was afraid no one wanted her back for what she did. We talked more. I wanted her to use my cell phone and call home, but she wouldn't. I told her I'd call and see if her folks wanted to talk to her. She hesitated, gave some bad excuses, but eventually she agreed. She dialed the number. I took the phone. Her mom picked up, and I said hello. Awkwardly introduced myself and said her daughter would like to speak to her. Silence. Then I heard crying. I gave the phone to the girl, and she was just quiet listening to her mom cry. And then she said hello. And then she cried. And they talked. See, I have a daughter, and so I feel very emotionally attached to this. They talked, and she gave the phone back to me. I talked to her mom some more. I drove her down to the bus station and brought her a bus ticket home. I gave her $100 cash for incidentals, some formula, diapers, wipes, snacks for the road. I got to the bus, and she just cried over and over, thanking me. I gave her a kiss on the forehead and a hug, kissed her baby, and she got on the bus. I get a Christmas card from her every year. She's 21 now and in college. Her name is Michaela, and our baby is Joe. So would an experience like that give your life meaning? And if it would, why would it give it meaning? Like, what is it about that story? It makes me emotional. I don't know if it does anybody else, and I don't know that I even care. But it's a very interesting story. Because if you think about this, this says so much about human beings. It says about how awesome we can be, and also says how disgusting we can be. I mean, it's got all parts of the spectrum. The idea that a teenage girl can live on the streets for a year with her baby, and nothing in our systems has come to stop that or prevent that, So it's got both awesomeness and horribleness, and it has the part about fighting, which human beings are really good at, and also the part about forgiveness, and it's all that human emotion all wrapped up. So the guy, War Toad, I don't know his real name, he changed 2 lives and the life of her parents with, if you think about it, a few dollars and maybe an hour or 2 invested. He had huge impact on many lives by what he did. So this is one way to create meaning in life, is to help others. And the reason why is because this helpfulness thing appears to be wired into us. And I mean, we probably won't ever know exactly why, but if you think about it, it's probably a byproduct of the whole thing that allows us to raise children for 14 or 16 or 18 or 20 years and nurture them and then send them out into the world. It has to do with love and all the stuff that evolutionarily goes into that and all kinds of stuff. But this is wired into us, and we can take advantage of that wiring. It's well known for thousands of years that when we help others, we enrich our own lives. That is part of being human. And if you don't want to help teenagers on the street, 1.6 million teenagers run away every year in the United States. If you don't want to do that, and you don't want to help people overseas, you don't want to help people living in poverty, you can just apply it at home. What if you became the world's ideal spouse or the world's greatest parent and just had an effect on your own household? That could give your life meaning. And you could actually, start a website about it and talk about how you became the world's greatest parent. You might not put it in those terms exactly, but you could talk about it and enrich the lives of hundreds, thousands, millions of other people. I'm still amazed that something like 10 million people a month come and look at how stuff works. And I started that at my kitchen table just as a guy. There's no magic in that. So you hear this a lot. Like, people will read this story and say, wow, that restored my faith in humanity. Well, what if we, us, me, you, any of us, were to say, I'm going to restore faith in humanity? That would be a way to give life meaning. And that would not be a bad way to do it. So, what if you were to be one of the people who restored faith in humanity? What if you did it once a day or once a week? What if we were all doing that? If that were the case, how much different would life be? How much different would the world be? And how much more meaningful might our lives be as a result of that? You'd be able to look back at your life 20 years from now and say, I made a difference, and know that you actually did. So the second way to give meaning to life is through design. This little equation. If you live to be 82 years old, you're going to have about 30,000 days on this planet. That's your existence. There is no afterlife. This is your existence. 30,000 days. So you can ask, what is the meaning of my life? And in that way, give your life meaning. Because human beings create meaning. That is what we do. So in asking this question, you start the process of giving meaning to your life. So the question to ask about this question is, have you ever asked it? Have you ever actually sat down and asked yourself, what is the meaning of my life going to be? And actually taken the time to really think it through and come up with a hard, solid answer to that question. And in a lot of cases, people don't do that. I wrote a book for teenagers, and I've talked and worked with a lot of teenagers, and this is one of the things teenagers tend not to ever get to for some reason. I don't know why exactly. So you could ask, what is the meaning of my life? What is the purpose of my life? What am I going to do with my 30,000 days on Earth? What will I do with my existence? And we can make little bracelets about that, but I don't have the way to do that. So I am going to pass these out, though. These are little pieces of paper that you could attach to your bathroom mirror so that you see them in the morning. And you wake up, and you hit your bathroom mirror, and you think, oh yeah, that. What am I going to do with my existence? I guess I could think about that. And if you do that for a couple weeks, you could actually come up with some amazing stuff. A lot of you have, since you're here, have probably gone through this at least part way, but maybe not the whole distance. It is actually the most powerful thing that you as a human being can do, because you create your meaning when you do that. You actually take control of what your 30,000 days are going to mean to you, to the world, to your family, whatever. So the thing we often miss is that our lives are basically a set of things that happen to us during the day. Then we make a set of decisions based on those things, and we take a set of actions. Those actions we have complete control over, and they decide what the meaning of our life is going to be. We can allocate that 30,000 days in any way we like to accomplish anything we want for any reason in the world. If you want to sit around and sip margaritas by a pool all day for 30,000 days, it's your life. You could do that. You could make that happen. If you can pick anything. That's just the thing. It's your life, and you get to design it. So these are the things that allow that to happen, especially for us living in the United States. We have our 30,000 days of existence. That's like our ride ticket. We've been given a ticket to ride on this particular amusement park for 30,000 days. We have our ability to think. We can come up with anything we want, imagine whatever we want, dream whatever we want, and we have the freedom to make choices to implement what we think of. That is all you need to create meaning in your life. So this is the famous Socrates quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." So the obvious answer to that is to sit down, take a weekend, and examine every part of your life. Just rip it apart. Take a look at the whole thing and evaluate it. Do you like it? Some parts you're going to love. Some parts you're not going to like. You can change the parts you don't like and actually make them into something you do like. You have total control over it. So asking that question gives you the power to do that. The third way to give meaning to life is through unity. And we aren't doing a very good job of this, but this is sort of speculative. So I'd like you to imagine that the first super intelligent alien species from some other part of the universe comes to visit us, and they arrive in their spaceship the size of a small continent. It hovers over the planet, and they beam down a set of representatives to do an assessment. So thousands of these beings arrive on our planet and start interviewing us to find out what there is to know about the human species, us. The 6.8 billion. What have we got here? And they are just shocked. They do their evaluation. Half of us, at least 300 billion, are living on $1 or so a day. They lack those scraps of paper with ink on them, and so they're living in abject, unbelievable poverty. Billions of people, no health care at all. 10 million kids die every year, as I mentioned before, from starvation or cholera or poor drinking water. We are just destroying the environment in hundreds of different ways. We know this. We are unable to control it, but we know we're doing it. There's constant war. We have, in the United States, 5,000 nuclear warheads on rockets fueled with buttons that we could push to launch in like 60 seconds. And the Russians have 5,000 nuclear things ready to fly back at us. We call that mutually assured destruction. And that's the best idea we've come up with. Like, it sounds insane, right? Mutually assured destruction. And that's our best idea. We've invested... An omen. We've invested just billions, probably trillions of dollars into making that our best idea for how we're going to deal with each other. I mean, it's nuts. This alien species would come to the conclusion that we are completely insane. So how do we fix this? Like, how would we make this better? And the question is, what is the meaning of our lives as a species, as humanity? If we were to present ourselves to this alien species, what is our goal? What is our meaning? What are we trying to accomplish as a species? And let's say I ask you that question. Like, what is our goal as a species? Now, you might be able to come up with an answer, and you would be making something up. And you would just make something up. If an alien species were to, take you on board and query you, okay, what's the goal of the human species? And you would like, crap, I don't know. We don't have a goal. I mean, really, no one has ever taken the time to formulate on a worldwide, global level, a goal for the human species and then communicated it down to all of us so that we all have a common vision. That hasn't happened, right? We all know that. We have no goal as a species. We are clueless, absolutely clueless. And if you go back to this slide, this is the result. We pay dearly for that cluelessness. This is the result of our inability to even think about what our goal is as a species is. So I'm going to propose a goal. And my goal that I propose as the first goal for our species is to create heaven on earth. And this is what heaven on earth would look like. First of all, everybody, all however many billion of us, would have access to adequate, abundant food and abundant clean drinking water. We'd have access to housing, luxurious housing, not mud shacks, but everybody would have access to housing. We would have access to education. We would all have access to cutting-edge health care, and we'd be pushing the cutting edge forward, curing more and more diseases as rapidly as we possibly can. We would do a set of things that would make all human beings comfortable. Not necessarily happy, because part of being human is that even when we live in total luxury, we aren't necessarily happy, but we would all be comfortable and taken care of and safe, and we would do that in an environmentally sustainable way, so we don't cause a giant mass extinction event that takes us out with it. That would be a good first goal for the human species. I think we could probably, most of us, come to agreement on that. There'd probably be arguments. There'd be a number of people who wouldn't want to go that way, but I think most of us could agree that this would be a decent first goal. I don't know what the second goal would be. Maybe it's to build continent-sized spaceships and go look at other societies. I don't know what it would be. But, would our lives be better if we did that? And if we were all working toward a common goal as a species, would that make our lives better and give us more meaning? What if we all had this feeling that everybody was trying to help us, that we were all on the same team working toward something together, as opposed to how we sometimes feel now? And what if we recognized that we were all in this together? Then we would have a better place. I mean, we would just be in a better spot, I think, as a species. We would have more meaning. We would feel better about our time, our 30,000 days, and we would actually be accomplishing something so that we didn't look like total idiots when the alien spaceship does arrive. So where do robots come into all this? Okay. If I say to you, hey, I want to create heaven on earth. I want to give everybody luxurious housing. I want to give everybody abundant food and clean drinking water. I want to give everybody education and entertainment and safety and health care. And we look at that, and you're thinking, this guy is totally insane. We can't do that. That's impossible. That is, it is apparently it is impossible right now because we are so far away from that ideal that we are ashamed of ourselves. So how would we do it? Well, so here's what double E's around the world are doing right now. As far as we know, there is one intelligent species in the entire universe right now. Now, there might be more, but we don't know about them yet. And there's no evidence that there's more than one. There is one intelligent species in the entire universe that we know of right now. Double E's and computer scientists and related engineers are in the process of creating this second intelligent species on this planet. Okay? It will be a direct competitor with human beings. It already is in some areas. So a direct competitor with human beings on especially the job front. And if you think about it, I'm going to pull up another slide here. And this is just going to take a second for the transition. Okay, I know that this might be hard to read. This is the United States economy, broken down by job categories. This is how people work. So if you look at this, like right up here, 16 million people are left working in manufacturing. It used to be about 3 times that many. We have education. 2.5 million people are working in education. We have retail. 14 million people working at Walmart and Toys R Us and Best Buy and places like that. We have construction. 6 million people. Okay? Right now, a large number of double E's and computer scientists and related folks are working on the technology that will eliminate all those jobs. So if you think about it, construction. What is a construction robot waiting for? It's waiting for a good, inexpensive, general purpose vision system that is about as good as the human visual system. Once we have that, that's the missing piece right now. It's just not that hard to imagine a robot that can put on shingles or stack bricks with mortar between them or paint walls or do a lot of other things that human beings do right now and totally take out the construction sector. There's a sector up here for transportation and warehousing, 3.7 million people. We're already, I don't know if you saw it, but Google has cars driving around on regular roads right now, largely autonomously. Okay, so in the not very distant future, we're going to have trucks and cars that drive themselves. And FedEx won't need to hire all these people, and neither will UPS, and neither will the post office. And all those folks are going to be, truck drivers, cab drivers, all those folks are going to be out of work as well. The retail sector, okay, stocking shelves, sweeping floors, bringing carts in from the parking lot, yelling at teenagers who are rowdy in the store, checking shoplifters, all that kind of stuff. That's easily automated at some point with a vision system. We can probably do it now with RFID tags and a little creativity, but once you have a vision system, it gets easy. Okay, that's another 14 million people. The conventional wisdom is, well, the economy disposes of jobs all the time and it creates new ones. But yeah, it does, except if you have a second intelligent species that starts competing with the first intelligent species in every job category, and then it kind of changes a little bit. And we know this. If you have a machine that can drive trucks 24/7 without a lot of accidents and no drunk driving and no emotional problems, and all the stuff that goes with truck drivers, you take out those jobs. Well, what are you going to create if you have a second intelligent species for all those truck drivers to do? Because it's going to start on the really simple stuff that we've talked about, the construction and retail, but we know that it's going to advance and start taking out lawyers. It's already starting to take out doctors a little bit. We have surgical robots. We have systems to do pharmaceutical stuff better than a human pharmacist can do it. Teaching is already happening in Korea with robots now, so we take out teachers. We could easily imagine in a pretty near term, especially once vision gets figured out, taking out 50 million jobs. And right now we're in the middle of a recession that shows us how bad it feels when 15 million people are out of work. It's uncomfortable, especially if you're one of the people out of work. It's, it at times approaches suicidalness. It's because you don't have enough of these little scraps of paper with ink on them. And now you can't feed your family, and you can't make your mortgage payment, and you can't pay for the car, and it stinks to not have a job. And yet, we, double E's and computer scientists and so on, are in the process of creating the technology that's going to essentially make human beings irrelevant in the job market. Ultimately, there's no reason that we would need human beings in the job market. So this is the part that is really interesting to me. And it goes back to that nuclear bomb thing in a little way. We're kind of sitting on the technology that's going to destroy a lot of stuff. And we actually have a choice. I'm not going to advocate that we don't create robots because A, that's not going to happen, and B, there are lots of things humans do now that are just a waste of human potential. Flipping burgers or scrubbing toilets or any of myriad jobs like that. That is just a terrible waste of the humanity that is inside a human being. So what I'd like to advocate instead is that we realize that if robots are doing all the work, then human beings could go on perpetual vacation, right? Because there is no work that needs to be done. And if you were to look back historically, we were actually on that path. So we went from working 7 days a week for like 12 hours, and we did that even if we were 8 years old. And we came up with a set of laws that established the 5-day work week, and then the 40-hour work week, and then the 40-hour work week with benefits. And we were on a path that was going to take us to the 4-day work week, and then we kind of lost our momentum in that way. And what's happening now is that we're actually going backwards. So we have all this technology that's increasing productivity, but our wages and our time worked aren't going up, or up in the case of wages and down in the case of time worked. We're going backwards. We're actually taking that increased productivity, and at the same time we're reducing people's wages on average, and we're increasing the amount they have to work. We have as a society almost, this in a way is a little bit of insanity. So we have all this technology that could easily allow the entire human species to go on perpetual vacation eventually. And if we were to make a decision to do that, we could easily make it happen. And yet, we aren't going in that direction. We're going in the opposite direction. And in the United States, we can see what would happen if 50 million jobs were to disappear. Those 50 million people would be up a creek. It's like the people who are out of work now. They've lost their jobs because of the economic downturn. The government gave them 99 weeks of unemployment, which is not like unemployment, it sounds great, but it's poverty level amount of money. They got 99 weeks of that, and right now about 2 million people have exhausted that. They can't get a job, and so now they abandon their house and their car, and they either live with friends or they become homeless. That is how our economy is wired right now. We do not have a lot of support for folks after that 99 weeks runs out. So that is how our society is designed now. I would like to propose that since we're the ones building the technology that's going to make this change happen, perhaps we should also be socially conscious enough to propose the system that's going to prevent it from wreaking havoc on millions of lives. We have the ability to do both those things, to advocate for the social change while we're building the technology that's going to cause the social change. But we tend, being engineers, to focus just on the technology side and ignore the social impact. So this is something we know is inevitable. It's something we could actually own because we are creating the technology that is going to cause it to happen, it could be an amazingly good thing for the human species, or it could be an amazingly bad thing for the human species. And I've written extensively about this, and it's all up on my website, and you can read it if you'd like. Those are really two paths. And the message I would like to convey to you today is that since we own the part of the equation that's going to develop the technology, it would also behoove us to own the part of the equation that prevents the negatives that are going to occur as we take out the construction industry and the transportation industry and the education industry and the retail industry and the rest of the manufacturing industry and mining and utilities and all this other stuff. Like, just understand, we are going to eliminate all those jobs, so let's advocate for a social system that would make that not such a gigantic catastrophe, because it will be a gigantic catastrophe when we have completely created the second intelligent species if we don't figure something out. So, if you'd like to learn more, you can come to marshallbrain.com. If you'd like to actually converse about this or go a step further, I'm actually actively working on the social side of this. It's taken me a couple years to wrap my head around it, but I have some ideas on how to push that forward. So if you go to marshallbrain.com, my email address is up there. That's the opposite of the Streisand effect. This is the give it out and hope people will contact you effect. You can send me email and we can have lunch or something. I'm very interested in taking what robots bring to us and making good out of it for humanity as opposed to making bad out of it, and making heaven on earth out of robots rather than hell on earth. So I thank you for your time and attention today. I mentioned this site. This is what you would refer to as a social media site. It's basically a link aggregator. The way it works is folks come and they submit links, and then they get voted on, and then people comment on the links. And a lot of times people will submit little stories like this, and or they'll ask for advice from the community or something, and and people will offer sometimes insanely bad advice, sometimes brilliantly useful advice, and you have to be able to filter it. And so other people will comment and often let you know what's insane and what's brilliant. But from my perspective, it's just interesting because it's a way of keeping up with what is happening in the world of technology and science and so on, which is the part I'm most interested in on a daily basis. And so, but I also just enjoy the community aspect of it, even though I don't personally participate in that. There's moments of brilliance on it, and there's moments of absolute abject stupidity on it. So you kind of get both ends of the scale.
So, since we're talking about humans and robots, so we already know that we don't make robots just for utility purposes. For example, recently in Japan, there's a holographic artist going around with few fluxes.
I saw that.
So do you have any thoughts about that direction of robots?
Well, it's extremely an interesting development. There was just so you know, there was a video that went around this week of an anime character brought to life, projected holographically on a stage, entertaining normal human beings, thousands and thousands of normal human beings come to see this avatar, this hologram of a artificial thing, that doesn't exist. And at the same time, in Japan, coincidentally, they have a humanoid robot that went on stage last week and is flexible enough and bouncy enough and so on that this robot dances with 4 human dancers behind her. You may have seen that. And this week, also, I forget the name. That one, it's called like the HPX4 robot or something like that. And there's another one, Anthroid or something, that the scientist is trying to create the best human analog possible in a robot. So, silicon mask face with eyes that are, human quality glass eyes with really good motors attached to them and teeth. And you look at it, and if you looked at it casually, you'd say it's a human being. It's a very, very good representation of the human being. And it's gotten over the canny valley or the uncanny valley until it starts moving. And then it's still, there's this thing with robots where an effector moves and then it comes to its stop point and it goes like this. And that's how you know it's a robot, because humans don't have that, effector sway at the end of travel. Humans control for that. And we apparently just haven't gotten quite that far. ABB has gotten that far with their industrial robots, but when you put legs on them and they're standing in space, you don't have that kind of rigidity, and so you get that effector sway. It's not a human, but we're getting closer and closer to the point where it's easy to imagine in 5 or 10 years we have these things in our normal lives that we interact with pretty much like human beings, because they look exactly like human beings and they talk and we get rid of effector sway and they move like human beings. And you walk into McDonald's and it does facial recognition on you and it says, "Oh, hi, Marshall. Glad you're back. What would you like today? Would you like the usual?" And you say, "Oh, sure." Except that'll work the same way in Milwaukee and Atlanta and Raleigh, because it'll all be tied into a giant database. And it'll actually be better. It'll be cool to walk into McDonald's and be recognized and known. And, the robot will know that I have 4 kids and that we normally shop at the Kerry store once a week. And, that'll be a nice experience. But those folks at McDonald's aren't going to have jobs anymore. And it's the same way it'll affect Walmart. It'll affect everything. It'll be amazing, except that Walmart employs 2 million people. And those 2 million people are happy to have those jobs, as uncomfortable as those jobs often are. Those are not the greatest jobs in our economy, but they beat the alternative. And you take those jobs away, and now what? And it will happen. It will happen in 20, 30 years. We just have to crack the vision problem and get a little bit better on natural language processing, and it'll be happening. Next question.
So the whole discussion about meaning and robots and replacement, I wonder, isn't part of the meaning of life what we do?
Mm-hmm.
What we choose to do. Work is part of that.
It is.
Isn't there something built into us as a society and as individuals that would guide us on this journey naturally? Nobody wants to replace millions of, or put millions of people out of work. If they did, there'd be social unrest. Doesn't that give us some sort of natural guidance to market? Robots aren't free either. They cost money. And so people have to choose to divert money into replacing people's jobs. So it's a very complicated scenario. It's a vision that could happen, but I think there's going to be opportunities for straightening out the vision as we go.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with a portion of it, but I would point to a little bit of history. Like the economic downturn happened, and it depends on who you ask. There's either 10 million people unemployed right now or there's 20 million people. And that difference is that The other 10 million people have just stopped looking for work. They've given up. So they don't show up in the official unemployment. These people are still desperate enough that they're trying, and these people have just completely given up. So there's 20 million total that are unemployed right now. Is there any social unrest around that? Well, no. Those of us who have jobs are really thankful that we have jobs, and we're sympathetic to this group of people, but as a society, we've decided we'll give them 99 weeks of unemployment compensation, and then they're out of luck. That's what we've decided, and they'll take that. There's not protests in the street by the 20 million people, although I think that could be interesting. If they all went down to the mall and 20 million people is. I went to the Rally for Sanity. I actually went to that. That was only 200,000 people, and that was a lot of people. If you drop 20 million people on the mall, that would make an impression. That would just overrun. So there's that. We took out 2/3 of factory jobs without anybody screaming. And what happened to those people? They all ended up at Walmart and Toys R Us. We replaced factory jobs with service sector jobs. But we're about to, service sector jobs have been safe because robots lack vision systems. That really is the, there are some other details, but that's the big missing part. You've come up with a vision system that works kind of like, even if you had a cricket vision system, you'd be doing a lot better. Crickets are pretty amazing. Octopuses are pretty amazing. There's 3 billion people on the planet who could be gainfully employed consumers, but they're living on $1 a day. We tend to not account for the folks who are on the negative side of a change like this. Now, they could revolt, but they tend not to. So, yes.
Could you remark about the fact that, or the comment that the scenario you're presenting about robots taking over has to do with the fact that we have placed more meaning in these pieces of paper we're printing on them than we have to the human being? Isn't that the sort of natural result of doing that? We want to make more money with these robots, otherwise we wouldn't do it. So we're placing a big meaning on these pieces of paper. We want to pick it up there.
Yes, because it does have meaning. And, it's like, so that gets into the deep societal, that just gets into human society. That's the same thing that causes the huge discrepancies in people's lives. Some people are living on $1 a day, and some of us are doing much better than that. It's sort of like, let's just imagine Walmart is the first company to roboticize its establishment. Well, as soon as it does that, every other retailer has to do it. The economic reality is they have to do it because now they can't compete with Walmart on price anymore. Unless they make the transition, they can't compete. And that's the nature of the economic system we live in. The only way to change that is to change the economic system, is as a species to decide that human welfare is an important value that we're going to guarantee, as opposed to just letting it occur, haphazardly like it does now, where all the problems that were on that slide occur. And I guess what I'm advocating is that we actually do make that decision, that we decide that human welfare is an important value that we are going to, A, fix, because it's terribly broken right now, and then maintain, and come up with the system that would do that. The argument would be, well, it's impossible. There's no way to do that. Well, there's no way to do it under the current system. We have to change. We have to actually set up a change that would make it happen. So, yes, I agree with that. We have to make that change, or the result is going to be uncomfortable. It's just Yes.
So these ECE, CSE people that are doing these robots, automating all these sectors of our society and replacing these people, they're doing it because they want to have their life, because their lives want to have a meaning, right? And they're affecting in a way our lives. And unless you affect someone else's life, you probably don't have meaning either. Don't you think, though, that another instinct people have, which is fear, would prevent this thing from completely, I guess, destroying us and replacing everyone with just machines? Because, just like you said, Google has an automated car. Talking with some friends about it, when I first read this news, I heard there was also an accident. Don't you think that in front of that fear of a accident, which can be a lot less than drunk driving and us doing it ourselves, will prevent us from replacing us?
No. But so I'm trying to come up with the better, longer answer by analogy. So,
And I'll add that throughout history, there's always someone in a way in power and someone that does not have it. And once that oppression increases after a point, there's something such as a riot or an overturn of power, which will always kind of, in a way, balance things out.
yes, that is true. It's often a very long, drawn, and painful process to overturn. See World War II as an example of trying to overturn a bad actor that got into power. That was an expensive transition. So, you know, I would just go back to that. I would just go back to the transition from out of manufacturing. We are replaced. I mean, I did a show called Factory Floor. We flew around and we went to 40 factories in the United States. And one in particular was really interesting to me because they had 4,000 people making widgets in the United States. I mean, it was a huge factory, and you think 4,000 people, that's a lot of people making widgets. That's not common anymore. And so I asked the obvious question, why are you still making these widgets in the United States? Why haven't you moved this off to China? And he said, well, what we've done is we've automated and we've automated and we've automated, and we've gotten the human cost of each widget down to about 50 cents. If we were to move, and this was a widget that sells for $100, the human cost of it was 50 cents. If we moved it to China, it would go down to 30 cents, but that 20 cents would then just get eaten up in all the transportation costs and all the junk of dealing with China, and it's just, economically, it doesn't make any sense. But let me take you over here and show you this new cell. This will eliminate 2,000 of our people and get that cost down to the cost of China. So, I mean, they've already reduced the human cost to basically totally negligible, but they want to reduce it by half again. And to do that, they're going to take out 2,000 of their employees. And he didn't want me, the reason I'm not mentioning the name of the company or its industry, was that he said, I don't want you to talk about this, but I'm going to show you this cell. And it just completely automated the whole thing. You didn't need any human beings anymore. And like, I went to a pasta factory, of all things. The pasta factory was two buildings, two giant buildings. One, trainloads of wheat, Durham wheat, comes in, trainloads and trainloads of wheat. It goes into a giant building that turns it into flour. So I mean, how anal are these people? They had a system that took a picture of every single grain of wheat individually that entered the factory, took a picture of it, looked at it, and said, is this grain of wheat acceptable for this factory? Is it the right size? Is it the right shape? Is it the right color? If not, as it shot past the camera, it flew into the air, and then an air jet would shoot it out, and it became cattle feed. Only the right size, the right shape, the right color kernels went into this factory. That factory, the right hand, from my perspective, this building turned that flour or that wheat into flour. It was run by two people. It was 7 stories tall. It was full of machines for sorting and grading and grinding and sifting and, you know, all this stuff. 2 people, and at night they went home. And it would call them if something went wrong. I mean, that's how automated they had turned flour making. Like, 1 person full-time ran that entire gigantic, it was unbelievable that 2 guys, and they had this little control room, and it would just page them when something went wrong. They could have taken the whole day off if they wanted, because nothing ever went wrong. So that's the nature of the beast. The beast is, we are going to use automation to lower costs and eliminate human labor at every single turn available, because that is how our economy is wired right now. There's nothing that's going to stop that short of us thinking, hey, it would be nice if all human beings could go on perpetual vacation when the robots are doing all the work, and let's work toward that as a species. Yes?
So, coming to what we're discussing now, the difference between our economy right now and a completely socialistic economy would be that in our economy we have to eat according to their ability, but in completely socialistic we have to eat according to their needs. Now, if the case is that robots can do anything that humans can do, then there's no value to humanity anymore. So, do you think in future the economy is inevitably socialist?
I've written about this quite a bit, and I don't know, I don't know that I would call it socialistic, but what would you call the Star Trek economy? Okay. Is Star Trek socialistic? I mean, and I realize that's science fiction and it's totally hypothetical, but in general, it's also preposterous, because if you have all that technology, they wouldn't have any human beings on the ship. I mean, you would have robots, obviously, because that's where we're headed. But it's the case that you would give each human being access to housing and food and water and so on in the same way that we have access to highways now. I mean, we access highways. I haven't ever really labeled that. Is our highway system socialistic? Well, then, so if food was done in that manner,
I'm not necessarily saying being completely socialistic is a bad thing, but the question is that where we're heading?
well, I think we have 2 choices. One choice is we take out all those jobs, we do what you said, we make human ability valueless, and in our society, as it's structured right now, what happens is wealth all concentrates into a handful of people. That's happening right now. And the folks who don't make it end up homeless or on welfare or living under a bridge in Key West or something. I mean, that is how our society is wired right now. So we can either let that process extend to a very uncomfortable limit. I don't think we have a revolution, whoever asked that, because we will eventually have robotic police forces that won't allow that kind of thing. I mean, we're going to get boxed in, I think. Or we come up with a system that says, every day you get a certain number of credits that you can use for your housing and your food and your clothing and so on, and you can use it in any way you like in this economy. I mean, those seem to be the options, because you aren't going to get a job because this second intelligent species is going to beat us in every manner. I mean, I guess you could hand paint greeting cards and say, yes, this was a human-made artifact. Would you like to buy it? It's hard to imagine an economy made out of that, and it's hard to imagine that a robot wouldn't just duplicate that and say, oh, look, I can do exactly the same brushstroke she does, and so here, take mine instead.
We cannot also ignore that many people give meaning to their life purely on their ability rather than anything else. There are many people who do that. So the question is, even if we have some other means to, give healthcare and all that stuff, people will still find it very difficult to find the meaning because they are not, doing it.
Yeah.
If anybody is in perpetual holiday, I don't think you'll be any good about it.
I don't know the answer to that question, but I would pose this to you to just think about over the next couple of days. If you had, let's say the university, not the university, let's say a corporation gave you a stipend and said, here you go, $100,000 a year. This is your stipend. You can do anything you want, absolutely anything. We have no strings attached. You choose. What would you do? For 40 years. Here's your stipend. Your lifetime. Your 30,000 days. Blow it open. So now you've got 30,000 days. You got a $100,000 a year stipend. Everything else stays the same. You're an island, and you won the lottery. What would you choose to do? I mean, I've thought about this question a lot. But just think about it. Would you choose to scrub the toilets of the Hilton Hotel down the street? Probably not. I'm just guessing. Would you choose to flip burgers at McDonald's? Probably not. Would you be a trash man? No, I don't think so. There's a set of things that immediately no human being would ever do. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. Would you work in the shark tank of a giant corporation? I don't know. Would you? I know a lot of people who would just start educating themselves. They would say, I'm going to blow out my education. I got a lot of stuff I want to learn and play with and probe. And I know a lot of people, as funny as this sounds, who would just hop on a cruise ship and they would be sipping margaritas, to use a previous example, all day by the pool, and they would be completely happy doing that. I bet half of America actually might fall into that category. I don't know. I think if that was how your life worked, you would find something to do with that existence, and it would have meaning for you. I got a good friend who would bass fish all day. He'd get himself a boat, and he would put gas in it, and he would fish all day long, and he would be absolutely happy and contented. He'd come home, and he'd cook his bass, and he'd read with his kid, and that would be his day. A lot of us would live very simple but very different lives if that were the case. Just think about it. What would you do if you had that stipend?